Hi friends. Today I'm going to talk about the week that Mike was in the hospital and then how he finally passed. So I have my tissues ready just in case, because I don't like telling this story, and so I sort of hesitated to do this video because it makes me kind of sad to think about that time in our lives. So the day before Mike went in the hospital, he was late for work, and he worked nights, so he had slept during the day and got up to go to work that evening, and he was really short of breath, and I noticed that it was like a little bit more than normal because he was always running around. He was always late, and he was always running around like a madman trying to get his scrubs on and everything for work, so he was like really short of breath. And I remember saying, like, honey, that's not normal. Let's maybe don't go to work tonight and we'll take you to the hospital and get checked out. But that was a Saturday night, and he was the only one working because I guess somebody else called out. So he felt like he had to go. And so I thought, well, I guess he's okay if he can go to work. He's making the decision to go to work, so he must be okay. So I didn't think about it again. And, he worked his 12 hours. I went to sleep. I woke up at 2 a.m. because that's what I would do to work. I worked at 2 a.m. because I did closed captioning for TV, and I did that for the East Coast. So our 2 a.m. here in Colorado is obviously their 4 a.m. So I was doing their 4 a.m. news, and that's when I started. It was a normal morning. He came home from work about 7. We always said hello to each other, kissed each other. I was always waiting for him to come home. Our doggy Tuna was so excited every morning when Daddy would come home. And so I was working still. We had a normal morning. He took Tuna for a walk. We lived on the third floor of an apartment, and everything was normal. He came and was relaxing, watching some TV. And I remember looking back at him, and he was just stretching on the couch like a normal morning, and he looked at me and he smiled, and then he decided he had to go to the store. So he always came and did this thing like on the back of me, and sort of like to tickle me, to tell me he was behind me without scaring me when I was working. And so he said, I love you, babe. And I couldn't speak, so I was like, and then I said, I just mouthed, I love you, and he went out the door. And that was the last time I saw him awake or alive, really. So we have an app, and it's called Life 360, and some of you might still use it. Me and my sisters still use it just to kind of check up on each other to see where we are. And I think it's a good feature to have, just so everybody's safe and where they're supposed to be. So I was captioning for ESPN, actually, and ESPN2, and I was doing some kind of ladies field hockey or something, and I was like, where's Mike? He should be home by now. It shouldn't take this long to go to the store, So I opened my phone and I look on our app, and it says he's at a hospital. And I was like, well, that's weird. He didn't tell me he was going to the hospital. And then I start to freak out because I always think about like car accidents. So I was like, oh my God, maybe he got in a car accident. So I texted him and I said, honey, are you okay? It says you're at the hospital. Well, he didn't reply. And so here I am captioning for ESPN2, and I can't just stop because people need their captions. So I'm texting my sisters, and one of my sisters calls the hospital. And so I was waiting for her to call me back or text me back, and she says to me, I think you need to call the hospital, because she had called and apparently he was there. So then I knew it was bad. And so it was halftime in my show. So during the halftime of my show, there's like no commercials, or at the time there wasn't. So sometimes you would have to caption the halftime show or whatever. But at this show, it was just like dead air. So I don't caption. I just sit there and wait till the sport starts again. So during that time, I called the hospital. I'm on hold for a while, and I explained, like, my husband, I think, is there because I saw him on an app and he's there and he's not responding to my text. And so a doctor comes on the phone and tells me, Mrs. Peak, I don't want you to panic, but you need to get here right away. Well, of course, if someone tells you not to panic, what's the first thing you're gonna do? Is like, oh my God, I'm gonna panic. And so he explains to me that Mike, his heart stopped. He got apparently he got to the store, he got out of his car, and he went straight down. So he had just parked, got out to go, you know, and his heart stopped and he went down. And they were able to, whoever, I don't even know to this day, 3 years later, who was able to do CPR on him at that moment to get his heart started enough to get him to the hospital. So I'm like, oh my God, you know, so I'm like messaging my team, and I'm like, I have to leave. And so they have to get somebody on the, you know, to take over for the captions for me, so that the hard of hearing and the deaf community can get their captions. And so here I am panicking, and I'm like, it's early morning Sunday, it's like 9 a.m. and I'm like, who's gonna answer their phone on a Monday? Because one thing the doctor did tell me, and I forgot this part, was he told me to not drive myself. He said, get someone to drive you and come to the hospital straight away. And so I'm like trying to call. I called his brother, Mike's brother, and I called one of my best friends, and nobody was answering. So, you know, in a panic, I decided to get in my car, in my Jeep, and I started like going through our parking lot, and I almost killed myself when I tried to get out of the parking lot. So, and that is at the same time that my best friend called and was like, I'm coming to get you, just hold on. So I'm sitting in the parking lot, you know, freaking out, like, oh my God, is this even real? And so, you know, I'm thinking, okay, well, his heart stopped, but they have it going, and you know, let's just get to the hospital. So it was kind of a long drive. It was about 15 or 20 minutes. We get to the hospital. My friend drops me off in the ER and goes to find a place to park. So I'm waiting in line, and there's like 2 or 3 people in line before me, like checking in to be seen at the ER. And I'm trying to keep it cool, but I'm panicking already. And all I say was, my husband was brought here and they told me to get here right away. That's all I remember saying, because they're like talking to each other quietly, and one of your worst fears happens, and like immediately I sort of went into a shock mode. A doctor and a priest, that sounds like a joke, but I digress. A doctor and a priest comes out and ushers me into a little room on the side of the ER, and I'm like, oh my God, he's dead. He's already dead. What the hell is happening? You know, this can't be happening. And it's so surreal that you're like, what the hell? He was just at home. He just walked our dog. You know, like, he was fine. He was just going to the store. He's fine. And I just remember, like, that's in my head, like, what the hell's happening? Like, he's fine. And I couldn't answer some of the basic questions about like his health history, because I'm starting to be like, holy bleep, you know, like, I can't believe this is happening. What the hell is going on? Like, I felt like I was in another realm. But thankfully my good friend was with us, and she was good friends with Mike too. And she knew a lot about him, just because me and her walked every day 2 to 3 miles. And so we would talk, and you just talk about each other's lives. And so she knew about Mike and some of his health, you know, history. And so she was able to answer questions where I couldn't. And so I remember they were taking us to the ER, then where he was at, and they had said he had just been intubated, which is when they put the tube down your throat so the machine can breathe for you, because you're not breathing on your own. And I will preface this as saying is I was trained as a respiratory therapist, so I know about life support. Like, I know what it's used for. I know how to do all that stuff. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I can handle this, because I've seen people on life support. I've taken care of people that were on life support before. But when you go in the room and it's your husband on life support, and he's kind of purple because, you know, his heart stopped and he must have lost some oxygen, and his eyes are glazed, like fixed over, and he's got the tube in his throat, and they're like undressing him. They had cut away all his clothes, but they're like putting the catheter in him, you know, and I'm just like, what the F? You know, I'm standing here by his side, like, and I sort of took a step back, because I was like, this can't be happening. In my brain, you know, it's trying to protect you from this tragedy thing that's happening. So right then when we got to the ER, his heart was beating, and he was on the ventilator because he was having a hard time breathing. They said they put him on there because he was struggling to like catch his breath and stuff, and the doctor felt that they needed to intubate him. And so they wheel him up to the ICU, the cardiac ICU. And I remember they took us up there, and it was like the longest walk of my life. I don't even remember. I wouldn't be able to tell you really how long it was, but it felt like the longest walk in my life. And I'm with this priest and this doctor again. And we go up to the cardiac ICU. And they make you, this was during COVID times, so they were like very particular who gets to go in the room. And usually they would only let 2 people go at a time. And so they had a waiting room that everyone was supposed to be waiting at. So me and my friend were there, and we're waiting in the waiting room because, you know, they're getting him in his room and settled and everything. And in the meantime, I'm texting all my sisters and his family. I called his dad to try to get him to help me tell everybody that Mike was in the hospital and this is what was going on. So my sisters came, and it seemed like they were there instantly, but I know a couple of them live a lot, like an hour and a half away, an hour away, but it seemed like they were there very instantly. And so we're sitting in the waiting room, and I knew which room he was in, which now I cannot for the life of me remember. I'm sure my sisters remember, but I don't know if it was 2304 or whatever, but they say code blue 2304. Well, I know what code blue is because, hello, I used to be a respiratory therapist, and I know that's his room. And I'm like, oh my God, that's Mike's room. I have to go. And so somebody, as soon as I like get up, somebody comes running down the hall for me and is like, Mrs. Peak. And so we go racing over towards his room. And his heart had stopped. I'm sorry. His heart had stopped again. And so I'm standing in the doorway because they're having so many medical professionals and their doctors and nurses and whatnot, like doing CPR and trying to get him back again. And his skin was so purple because, you know, his heart stopped and he's not getting oxygen. And I remember I was wearing this sort of blue top that I guess could look like a medical scrub top or something, because I had just thrown it on to get to the hospital right away. And so I'm standing next to the crash cart, and one of the nurses was like, hand me whatever. And I was like, what? I was like, I'm his wife, I don't know what to do. And because I'm thinking, well, I'm supposed to hand her something, you know. And she's like, oh my God, never mind. And so she gets in the crash cart and gets whatever she needs. And here I am watching them do CPR. And if you've ever seen them do that on the one person you love the most, it's very traumatizing. So they got his heart started again. And he's, you know, very, very purple at this point. And I'm like, oh my God, there's no way he's going to live because he's so purple. He didn't get oxygen. And I think actually I missed one of the times. So his heart stopped when he went down at the store. When he got to the ER, his heart stopped again and they got it back. And that's when they they intubated him. And so then that was the 3rd time that I watched when his heart stopped. And so if you can imagine, I actually was wearing my Fitbit at the time, and I kept the graphics, and if I can remember, I'll put them on the thing, but you can see like my heart rate was normal, and then you can see when it spikes, and when I find out he's in the hospital, and then the whole day it's over 100 beats per minute the whole time I'm in the hospital with him. But so they get him back, and you know, everything starts to calm down, but he's like purple, and he's on all these vasopressors to keep his heart pressure up, his blood pressure up, and his heart going. And that day, like, everybody got there. His dad drove 10 hours to be there. His sister and his brother got there. His mom was in Germany, so we had to FaceTime her. 2 of his children got to be there that first day. And I can't remember. I was such in shock that I don't remember all the timeline. So if I mess this up, family, I'm sorry. His 3rd daughter was flying in from Oregon, and I don't remember if she got there that day or the next day. But that first day in the hospital, that Sunday in October, it was such a beautiful day out, and it was like unseasonably warm. And October was Mike's favorite month, and so he was excited. The day before, I had went to a pumpkin patch with one of my sisters, and we got pumpkins. And that Sunday, we were gonna, like, he was gonna sleep during the day a little bit, because that's what he did. You know, you work nights, you sleep during the day. And then he was gonna wake up and we were gonna carve pumpkins, and I was gonna make us dinner. And so that was our plans for that day, but he ended up in the hospital. He was out of it. He didn't come to that day. And they let the whole family in the room. And like I said, it was COVID time, so they only said 2 people at a time could be there. And they could only be there from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. But they let me stay overnight because I think they thought he wasn't going to make it that first night. And I didn't either, because his blood pressure would go real low, and, you know, everybody would start to gather to, you know, because they were having to do CPR. And so the next day, you know, we made it. I didn't sleep. My sister Emily was with me, but we had to go. They made us go into a waiting room to try to sleep, but I couldn't sleep because every time I would hear someone start to run by, because here we are in the cardiac ICU, I'm thinking, oh my God, it's him. They're coming to get me, you know, but they didn't. So we wake up, or we get up at 8, and we're able to go back in the room, and they're starting to tell us, like, you know, only 2 people at a time can be here. So we're trying to make a schedule where everybody can get a time. And it was always going to be me in the room. I wasn't going to leave him. And so it was going to always be me and somebody else, because I just couldn't leave him. You know, he was the love of my life, my husband, and we were always in love with each other. And I would never leave his side. And so, like I said, I don't remember the whole timeline, but he went in on a Sunday. He ended up passing that next Friday. And in that time, in those 5 days, he had a heart pump in, because they found out his heart was only pumping 10% of what it should be. And so it was basically dying. And they didn't know why. There was really no reason why it should have been happening. And I asked one of the doctors, who was like a little spitfire, which I really respected him. He said, you know, sometimes this just happens. Sometimes your heart just stops. And I didn't like that answer. But I remember there were certain times, like, so they got the heart pump in, you know, and anytime he coughed, his blood pressure would go so low that he would almost die then. And so you can imagine if you're watching your spouse and you're like, oh my God, we're watching him cough, which is a completely normal thing to do when you have a tube in your throat, no matter how sedated you are. He almost died every single time he coughed, and it was like so scary every single time he coughed. Or, you know, if they rolled him over, or they tried to roll him or touch him, his blood pressure would go down real low again. And so we were just, those first 2 days, they put the heart pump in, and we were just trying to keep his blood pressure up to see if we could get him saved. And, you know, then his temperature would go super high, and they'd have to put the cooling blanket on him. And I remember this one time a doctor came in, and I can't remember what kind of doctor he was, but I feel like, again, I'm in shock, and he's telling me, well, like, oh, you know, his organs are shutting down. And I'm like, what? Like, if I wasn't in there with my husband, I would have thought rationally, like, yes, this is what happens when your heart stops and they have to bring you back. A lot of times your organs start to fail. And I was like, what? His organs can't fail? What is happening? You know, and so I just wanted them to try everything that they could try to keep him alive. And so, you know, every single day I had somebody else come with me in the hospital, and I was so stressed out that a few times I thought I was having a heart attack because I was so stressed out. I probably wasn't the nicest to other people, but I was trying to be hopeful for my husband, because I had like this tiny seed of faith that he would be okay. And I kept it for him. I didn't keep, like, logically, I knew that this was probably going to be it. But I had this teeny seed of, and hope of, little light of faith that he would live. And now I feel naive saying that, but if your husband was in there, or your wife, or whoever, your loved one is in there, and you feel like they need you to have a little bit of hope when nobody else does, you know, I feel like that's what my job was to do. So that's what I did. And there was one time when he came to, And they had made me go home because I hadn't showered or brushed my teeth in a few days. And I was super stressed because I wasn't eating. And so they made me go home. And I'm so sad because I wasn't there when he came to, but his sister was there at least. At least someone was there. But so we get to Friday, and I'm probably glossing over a lot of things. Actually, it was on a Thursday or Wednesday that a doctor came in and was like, I'm, Dr. Carlson, I'm the heart doctor. And I was like, oh, nice to meet you. And he said, oh no, we've met before, you don't remember? And I was like, no. Like, I had no memory. Now I actually do. Like, that memory has sort of come back, but at that moment I was like, I've never met you in my entire life. I don't know what you're talking about. And I asked him, I said, have you ever seen somebody come back from being this sick? Because they had told me that Mike was the sickest patient in the whole hospital. And in my naivety, I said, even more than all the COVID patients, because if you looked in his wing that he was in, every single door had a yellow do not enter sign, and that's where and every single door except Mike's was that way. I had asked that doctor, I said, well, have you ever seen anybody walk out after being this sick, after they told me he was the sickest patient in the hospital? And they said, if you're asking if I've ever seen a miracle, I have seen a miracle happen. And so then it's like every time they would say something like that, like his organs are failing, or have they ever seen a miracle? Yeah. And yes, but not often. And every single time I could feel like my soul just sort of like drop, and I knew, like, I just knew he wasn't gonna live. But I felt like it was my duty as his wife to have some sort of hope, and act like I had some hope. In fact, my friends and sisters, God love them, they had a chaplain come talk to me because they thought I wasn't handling it correctly. I mean, how do you handle this? How would you handle this if your husband was completely fine and then he was not fine? How would you handle it? I don't think there's a way you could handle it with grace and whatnot. I don't know. So I said, the chaplain was talking to me, and he was very smart. And he was asking me about my faith, and what I believed. And I said, I believe that God's in charge. And he said to me, then why are you trying to be in charge? And that really was like, wow, okay. I guess I need to, I felt like I had this fierce grip, and if I was going to let go, then he was going to die. And so he said, but you're not God. And God makes that ultimate decision. You don't. And so I said, okay. My doggy's coming back. I said, okay, I'm not in control. I know he's gonna die, but he deserves to have his spouse, his wife, have some kind of hope that he will live, and do everything she can to help him live. And that was the night before. That was Thursday. And so I was thinking, like, God must really hate me. He must think that my faith isn't good enough to save my husband, So I sort of gave up control. And one thing I talked to the chaplain about in that little space there was, I said, I'm really pissed that he didn't go to the hospital the night before when he was so short of breath. I was like, I'm so pissed at him. We could be out of this situation. They could have prevented something or something. But the thing that took the air out of my sails and the rage from me that I was feeling was, he said, you're just honoring your husband's wishes. And that's why he went to work instead of go to the hospital. And so that took all the anger out of me, because I really did just do what Mike wanted to do. He didn't want to go to the hospital. And so we didn't. And then, so Friday came, and it was a beautiful day. It was October 8th. It was a beautiful day, and it was 60s and total blue skies. It's like one of those dream days that you want in October to have. It was a beautiful fall day. And I remember they came to talk to me and they said, you know, if we do CPR one more time, it's gonna hurt him more because his ribs were already broken, you know, and they didn't think that he needed CPR one more time, he would live, because they said it would be just detrimental to him. And so they're like, here, you just need, and I was like, okay, yeah, if it happens one more time, we've tried everything we could try. We've done dialysis now, because he was on dialysis for a few days. They had the heart pump in, and then they had to take it out because there's only like a certain time you can have it in. So they had to take that out. And so I was like, yeah, we've done everything. And so that Friday I came in, and when they were talking to me about it, they were like, here, you got to sign this. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll sign it. And I didn't, because he was starting to look better. And even one of the doctors said, oh, he's looking a lot better today. He has a little bit of color. And he was kind of like restless. And so I would like stroke his beard and like play with his hair, because he liked that in real life. If, you know, I would stroke his beard or run my hair. He had the softest hair, and so I'd run my fingers through his hair, and he would sort of settle down. And I remember feeling way out of sorts that day, like kind of, oh, not in a panic, but like really upset. And we were there at 8 a.m., me and my sister Stephanie, and I could tell you what I was wearing. I could tell you what earrings I was wearing. I could tell you what pants, what shirt, how I had my hair, what I ate that day. And it was a beautiful day. And then it was about 6 o'clock, 5:45 or 6 o'clock, and one of the respiratory therapists comes in and starts listening to his chest and says to me and my sister, everybody get out. And so we get out of the room, and she's calling, you know, a code. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? He was just fine. Like, he was breathing he was on the ventilator still. But what the hell just happened? Like, he was okay. He was restless, but he was restless the whole day. Like, what the hell's going on? And so I'm standing there in the hallway, and like this feeling came over me like I was gonna pass out. And I can hear them starting CPR, because guess what? I didn't sign that stupid paper. And I could hear this machine saying, press harder, meaning doing the chest compressions. And I was like, whoo, you know, I thought I was going to go down in the hallway. And so I like sort of lean over, you know, and they get me a chair, and I'm like super crying, like just completely sobbing. But I remember, and I don't know what this was, and someday hopefully I have an answer for it, but I remember inside my soul, it got very still. Because I knew what was happening. I knew that the love of my life was leaving this world. And so once I was able to like be like, oh my God, and I could hear them saying, you know, this isn't working, and like trying to get him back, I was like finally like, oh my God, I need to hold him as he leaves the world. I want to make it peaceful for him, and I want him to know that I was there when he passed. And so I go lay next to him, and I'm like holding him and saying I love him and it's okay. And I'm sorry. I kept telling him I'm sorry that we didn't get to save him. And you know, we're calling his mom in Germany on the phone, and his daughter, one of his daughters, the one from Oregon, had just went home that day. And his mom was saying goodbye to him. You know, we were calling the other kids and the other family that were in town, because it was only me and my sister there. And so we were calling everybody to get to the hospital, because this was it. The one thing I could say is I was with him, at least when he left this world. And I told him it was okay to go, that me and Tuna would be okay. I really believe that he was in that hospital for 5 days because he didn't want to leave me, and his body didn't listen. So I believe that he gave me those 5 days so that we could all, and I mean his family, like his immediate family, my family, and most importantly me, got to say goodbye to him. And I really do think that he did that to kind of give us time to process what was happening. So he passed around 6:10. I'd have to look at the death certificate again to know for sure, but on a Friday night. And then they let me sit there with him for a while. And then there was a lot of people that had to come talk to me, and I had papers to sign. And then they gave us a little strip for me and the kids, like a little strip with his heartbeats. from earlier that week. So we got some of his last heartbeats, and they gave me other things that I'm not remembering. I got a lock of his hair. I can't remember what else they gave me, but I didn't want to leave the hospital because I knew the minute I left that hospital, it was gonna be real. And then I was leaving him there, and I would never see him again. So walking out of that hospital, I don't even remember. I do remember thinking, this is it. I came here as a different person, and now I'm leaving as by myself without him. And I remember standing outside with my sisters and his friend, and I'm sorry if I don't remember who else was there. But I remember just, it's dark, because we stayed there for a while. And I was like, wow, this is it. You know, what do we do? What do I do now? Like, where do you go now? And I was hungry. And I wanted Taco Bell because that was one of my comfort foods. And it's so funny because Mike never wanted to eat Taco Bell because he didn't like how it made his tummy feel. So I was like, let's get Taco Bell. And then they were closed, so we had to get McDonald's. But we went home and we were just sitting there, you know, eating our our McDonald's. And it was just like, this is it. That's it. And I was so out of it that my sisters and his sister, mostly my sisters, actually had to plan the funeral for me. Like, I asked his sister where we would do it at, but I told him what Mike wanted and what I wanted, and they made sure that it happened because I was so out of it. I was so in shock that, like, this really can't be happening still after my husband's gone, and I believe he's in heaven. But I was just like, this can't be happening. What the hell is going on? As like I always say. And so they had to plan his funeral, and I don't even know. It was nice to see how many people loved him and came out and supported him. I met people at the funeral that I had never seen before, I had heard before of, but never met. It was just nice to know that he was so loved, because one thing that Mike always forgot was how many people loved him. But it was, now I laugh and I wish I could tell him, honey, they love you so much. So many people loved you. You were loved and you so much and you didn't even realize it. But now it warms my heart to know that he was loved. I could see it. I knew people loved him, but he didn't. So it was really heartwarming to see that. So anyways, ooh, good talk. So that's the story of my husband passing. And then we'll get into other things like what I did after and what happened after and how my grieving was. I do remember the chaplain was saying, oh, you're going to grieve for at least 2 years and the second year will be the hardest. And I was like, please, no, I'm not. That's not even true. But that was again another naive thing, but because I will grieve the rest of my life for him. It's different now though than it used to be. But talking about it puts you right back in that space. So anyways, if you're still watching, thanks for watching. So just give me a like and subscribe to my channel, please. It really helps out. And then if you want to put a comment, please do. I forgot to add that one thing that Mike used to say was he was going to die when he was 49. And I always said, like, babe, if you really do think you're going to die when you're 49, you know, let's go get you checked out. He was always like, well, I feel fine. And so he was always pretty healthy. And so we never thought anything of it. And so when we were in the hospital too, I told one of the doctors, I was like, well, he said he was going to die at 49. And the doctor actually said, he said that? And I said, yes, he said that the whole time I've known him. And I said, and the doctor said, there's something to that. That might be the case. You know, it might have happened. So I don't know, like, spiritually how he knew he was going to die when he was 49, but he was 49 and almost 6 months. So that was just something that was always weird to me, how he knew. And he knew it was going to be his heart. Until next time, you take care. And remember, you are loved.